The claim that I am responding to today is that there have been no success in embryonic stem cells in humans. My opponent gives 4 secondary claims. 1 is the process of extraction of embryonic cells externally to life. 2, the obtaining of embryonic cells, which is a controversy that is highly debated. 3, there are other alternatives to embryonic stem cells. And 4, alternatives to embryonic stem cells are successful. In response to her first secondary claim, the process of extraction of embryonic stem cells, the evidence she provides is incorrect. She states that embryonic stem cells are obtained through the embryo and that internal organs are harvested when extracting stem cells, which in turn kills the embryo itself. But according to medical news today, stem cells are formed during the blastocyst phase of embryological development. Blastocysts are, according to Merck Manuals and Online Medical Dictionary, merely a hollow ball of cells. It is after blastocyst phase in which the embryo barely begins to develop internal organs, so the extracting of embryonic stem cells is not externally alive because the life had never begun. My opponent's secondary claim states that obtaining of embryonic cells is a controversy that is highly debated. Her evidence used to support her claim consists of an adult has the opportunity to live while a baby does not. In the Catholic religion, it is sin to take a life, and an embryo does not have any less value than a human being. My opponent has seemed to lost sight of what she was trying to argue, which as stated in her main claim is there have been no success in embryonic stem cell research in humans. The secondary claim, along with the evidence she provides, is not directly related to her main claim. She has brought up an entirely new argument, which is an argument of ethics. Regardless, the evidence she provides is highly opinionated and cannot be supported by factual information. In response to her third secondary claim, there are other alternatives to embryonic stem cells. She introduces induced pluripotent stem cells. These stem cells are extracted from adult bone marrow and are reprogrammed to have the same purpose as embryonic stem cells. She claims that these adult stem cells have a less chance of rejection from the body because the stem cells come from the original donor. She also claims that stem cells have helped over 73 diseases. Her information comes from the Family Research Council. This is the Christian organization website promoting traditional family values. Christianity is opposed to embryonic stem cell research and would naturally support the use of adult stem cell research as an alternative. But according to Scientific American magazine, altering these adult stem cells to have the same capability as embryonic stem cells have resulted in the creation of cells that age and die abnormally. Research done in 2010 by Robert Lanza, a chief scientific officer at Advanced Cell Technology in Massachusetts, has proven that at first adult stem cells can have similar characteristics as stem cells, but further study has shown that these adult stem cells begin having higher death rates. Prior studies have shown that adult stem cells are also prone to forming cancer. My opponent's final secondary claim states the alternatives to embryonic stem cells are successful. She then provides 2 success stories of the use of induced pluripotent stem cells. Both of these success stories derive from the same site, which is Stem Cell Research Facts. These 2 success stories reveal only minor and important improvement from the 2 individuals. In the first example, Laura Dominguez was paralyzed from the neck down in a car accident. Adult stem cells were extracted from the back of her nose, and they were replaced, and they were transplanted into the damaged area of the spinal cord. My opponent claims that within months she was able to walk in her walker, which in fact is untrue. It took 6 months for Laura to regain feeling up to her abdomen, and with much physical therapy is now only able to stand with the help of her walker. The second story is of a man named Dennis Turner who developed Parkinson's disease in 1991. Adult stem cells were injected into the left side of his brain, and Mr. Turner showed stable improvement for 5 years. What my opponent failed to mention is that now his health has again continued to deteriorate. This brings me to my conclusion. My opponent brings up alternatives to embryonic stem cell research. Yes, there have been examples of success stories in the past, but current research has begun to show that there may be problems with the rise of these new induced pluripotent stem cells.
Right, the main and secondary claims are labeled pretty well. The signpost on the first point, when you get to it, was pretty good. On that beginning point, it seems like it's mostly a discussion about what constitutes a life, and you've got a counterclaim, but I'm not exactly sure that that undermines the claim that the advocate presented. Neither side seems to be defining what they mean by life in this particular context, so that remains relatively problematic. You do discuss the issue of value on the next point, and you largely try and dismiss this point. What impact does that have in the long run? I think you need to explain how it has no impact on the long-term argument, or the fact that it's not relevant advances your position somewhat. I'm not sure that it does, but if it does, there would be some way that you could present that. On the next point, where you're talking about the, what do they call it, the iPSTs, the induced pluripotent stem cells, I thought that that was a pretty good argument there. I'm not sure that a criticism of the Family Research Council as a Christian site and therefore being biased is very helpful. I thought your argument that was responsive to it had much more to do with whether or not it's successful, and the discussion of higher death rates and long-term cancer rates applied a lot more directly to that particular point. And it's a good counterclaim that you bring some evidence on. On that last point, I think that you've got a couple of good responses to the particular examples that the advocate provided, although you want to make sure that you give us the follow-up information. I mean, the first one you say it's not true, and again, it may simply be a difference between how two people define, what walking using a walker means. Standing up is versus walking around. I guess that there's some challenge there, and I think that you need to explain why that challenge matters. On the second example, where you say 5 years later there's substantial issues, I think you need a source citation on that, because that's a pretty good response to the example that the advocate presented, but it needs the credibility of a source citation as opposed to just a generalization. All right, thank you.